Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss how events yesterday seem to be showing Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng that they cannot headbutt their way through the walls of reality. From their bullish statements on their economic experiments, they now appear to be seeing that they cannot beat the system with pig-headed arrogance. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So this is a quite unfortunately timed. I would think this week I'd like to be talking about the surprisingly impressive Labour Party conference that's going on, but I will catch up with that later in the week when the government have stopped setting fire to the UK economy. After yesterday, it may well be that Truss and Kwarteng are realising that they can't actually just do as they please. The first event that made me think something was happening behind the scenes was a seemingly innocuous attempt by a BBC reporter to get a quote from Kwasi Kwarteng as he ambushed him on the street, presumably walking between meetings. Kwarteng was asked by the BBC for a comment as he was walking along about how he's going to calm the markets down. The Chancellor, a bit hesitantly, responded that he wasn't going to make any comment now. Now, you do sometimes have journalists ask ministers questions as they bob along and the response is no comment. But this is only ever in a situation where you can't think of anything to say that isn't guaranteed to make things worse. And it can happen to good ministers and bad. You know, usually a minister will anticipate obvious questions and they'll have their stock response ready. Nobody's expecting you to stand there and give a half-hour lecture with detailed maps. The journalist is just expecting a quick soundbite. When you can't even give that, it shows you don't actually know what to say to make things better or just keep a lid on things. This is the reaction of a minister who doesn't have a handle on the situation. And like I say, it's not a reflection on the minister always. It's sometimes the case that just the shit's hit the fan and you need to have meetings to get a fuller picture of what's going on before you decide how to play it. It might be that you also need to consult with colleagues to agree the political position so that you don't like contradicting each other. So of course you don't comment at that point because you haven't had time to carry out that crisis management planning. That's the valid use of no comment. Something unexpected and significant has just happened and people need to get together to discuss the best way forwards. When the shit has only just hit the fan. But when you're the one who threw the shit and placed the fan, you can't be in that situation. This is a sign of completely losing control. You know, also, the pound has been tanking for several days at this point. It's inconceivable that Kwarteng hadn't had the time to hold meetings to decide his public response. I was wondering if it had anything to do with reports that some Tory MPs are now already submitting their letters of no confidence in Liz Truss. They certainly need to do something. If they wait until there's a run on the pound, they can forget it at the next election. Might as well just call a general election now and get their stress levels back to normal. Because there was something else very odd about that attempt by the BBC to get a response. Kwarteng's demeanour was not at all bullish. He was full of bravado when he gave his budget statement and immediately afterwards. When Kwarteng was challenged over his budget, he said, "The markets will react as they will." Well, they did react, precisely as anyone would have predicted with any knowledge of the economy. I mean, not the Chancellor then. But he was still bullish even after the pound fell in value, even after it carried on falling. His task was then to calm the markets down. Instead, he proudly proclaimed there's going to be more of the same coming later on. His attitude yesterday was rather less bullish. I'd say bordering on nervous about the shitstorm he was suddenly realised he'd lost control of. You could hear in his voice an uncertainty that was missing over the weekend. I'll post a link in the description below, of course. You can listen to it for yourself. To me, he sounded worried. He sounded unsure. This is not how he was sounding over the previous few days. Later on, the government promised two things. First, that they would be issuing a plan to go along with their economic policies in October. Second, that the Office for Budgetary Responsibility, who'd already offered to produce an economic report on the Chancellor's policies, would produce such an assessment in November. Now, both of these things should have accompanied the budget statement. They should accompany all budget statements. Some people I saw express surprise that the plan didn't even exist. But this is the reason why the markets are so spooked. It's not just that the Chancellor is taking tens of billions out of the coffers for tax cuts during a cost of living crisis and a major recession. It's that he has no plan for doing so. He just announced it. He just made it up off the top of his head and announced it as if it'll all just work. He didn't say how he was going to pay for it. He's flying blind. Funnily enough, the government wanted to avoid calling last week's statement a budget, preferring the term fiscal statement. In a way, you can see how that's fair enough, because a budget has details on how you're going to balance the books. This is completely absent. So now they're going to have to get Treasury officials to come up with a plan in retrospect. Truss and Kwarteng will be hoping that given time, both the plan and the economic assessment can be favourable towards their plans. This does not seem likely. If that was likely, they would have had the plan and the economic assessment report ready to go. If anything, it may seem like kicking the can down the road in the hopes that something else will crop up. But it was still a sign of the government being brought back down to earth. So what prompted it? Well, I wouldn't be surprised to hear that backbench Tory MPs were intervening. They must have been. Yesterday was just one disaster after another for them. They woke up to the news that the pound went lower than the dollar than it's ever been in its modern form since decimalisation. Then the news that interest rates were likely to add hundreds of pounds a month to mortgage repayments of quite a lot of Tory voters. Then several lenders pulled their mortgage products altogether due to market volatility. They weren't even offering mortgages. You couldn't go to them to a mortgage because it's like, well, we don't know where to set the interest rate. We don't know what's going to happen. Basically, the financial markets do not know what's going on. So they cannot afford to sell certain financial products, including mortgages. Then the day ended with the latest polling showing that Truss's honeymoon period is well and truly over. Talking about this in a separate video. I can't remember whether it'll be earlier today or later today, depends on which order I put these videos. But I will talk more about that in that other video, which may or may not be out. But it's surely clear that the Bank of England must have also had talks with the Treasury and explained to them, well, look, we're going to have to put up interest rates here to stabilise the pound. It's the only way. And that'll hit homeowners with mortgages. The Tories cannot afford to see repossessions on the scale that ended the last Tory government. And so, presumably, they blinked. So where does that leave Truss and Kwarteng? Well, because I can't be sure exactly what made them blink, it's partly speculation. What is certain is they are facing the prospect of trying to U-turn on the most unpopular parts of the statement without losing too much credibility. Tory MPs are likely to want Kwarteng to at least reverse the removal of the top rate of tax. From their point of view, it's deeply unpopular with ordinary voters, and it's only worth £2 billion anyway. It's not worth the political cost for a purely ideological battle against taxes for the rich. There was talk of letters of no confidence against Truss going in already, as I say, but it would be foolish for the Tories to want another leadership election so soon, or even at all before the next election. It would be much better for Tory backbenchers to wrest control of their party back from the ERG. I would say the most rational course of action would be to dump all the blame on Kwarteng and replace him, with Truss giving a statement on the need for detailed fiscal plans to accompany all budget statements in future. That should calm the market down. You make a scapegoat of Kwasi Kwarteng. I was saying that all yesterday on Twitter. Now, I do gather this morning from correspondence that some Tory MPs are indeed demanding Kwarteng be sacked and that Truss has got weeks to calm the markets down before they'll make a move against her. That is the rational course of action, in my view. Whether it works depends on how many rational Tory MPs there are. Because if it turns out it's just a dozen of them, Truss can easily ignore it if she wants. If it's 50 or more, that's trickier to ignore because there you're getting onto the number needed for a leadership, like a confidence vote, I should say. If it's 100 or more, she'll have to pay attention. Truss will still take a credibility hit, but there is the possibility here. If she doesn't do what they say, and there's enough of them that are prepared, maybe even to vote against the budget, that's a nuclear option that stops short of a leadership contest. They could say they're going to vote against her budget. She will take a big credibility hit there, but it is less damaging to the Tory party than to try and replace the leader if it's unnecessary. If she sacks her Chancellor after just a few weeks, she takes a credibility hit then, of course, because she appointed him, she approved of his plans. But her credibility is already hemorrhaging right now, and the risk is greater if she does nothing. I mean, I don't actually know which is better either in terms of getting rid of Kwarteng. Does he resign or does Truss sack him? If he resigns, it helps to make it look like it was his fault and he feels sorry about it and the Tory party can move on. If Truss sacks him, she can make herself look strong. you know, to the sort of voters who want to see her that way. You know, early on in the leadership contest, Truss made a mistake, didn't she? She made many mistakes, actually. But in particular, she published a campaign poster that was supposed to say she would hit the ground running. Instead, it simply said that she would hit the ground. We all laughed and said that the error was probably more accurate. Yeah, we were right. She has hit the ground, good and hard. She now has 1 week to regain the initiative before her party conference. If she doesn't, she'll lose the party. She's then got a further 2 weeks to sort herself out before Parliament's back in session, and she faces very critical questions from all sides. If she doesn't, she'll never get the public back. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.